All right, well, my name is Lizeth de la Garza, and I will be reviewing Chapter 12 and the article on creating an equal playing field. So to begin with, the Chapter 12 review, for starters, Nieto begins with the new teachers going to, she starts describing how teachers go into a brand new school, being hopeful and noble. And they go in for noble reasons, but given the circumstances, whether the schools are underfunded or they are minority based, with poverty, with students that are poor, their hope and their enthusiasm disappears. And she goes on to explaining her journey on how she was able to maintain this sense of hope in spite of everything that she encountered as a first-year teacher. And she starts to talk about how we have to remember that there's good teachers, that there's mediocre teachers, and that there's poor teachers. And when she first started teaching, the school had a very high turnover at 50%, and the teachers were very tired, and they were very discouraged. And the students, as mentioned earlier, were poor. They were African American mainly and Puerto Rican, and they lived in poverty. And her solution was to develop the strategies and self-confidence in connecting with students, understanding the inequality and the brutal poverty and the racism that these students sometimes have to encounter, not only by their teachers but by the staff, is very important in the part of becoming a teacher and becoming a successful teacher to begin with. Not only that, but then she goes on explaining that when teachers affirm their students, when they affirm their students' identities rather than view them as problems, they give their students the powerful message that they are capable of they're capable learners to begin with, but they're also worthy of an education, because this is what a lot of our students also lack, is they lack confidence. They come into these schools and they sometimes they don't understand it. They don't understand what they're learning, and that actually brings their confidence down. And it, not only that, but it also, their level of confidence begins to be a conflict with their learning abilities. Not only that, and then at the end, she starts talking about how parents play a very important role in the students' learning, but they're also not the center of a student's learning. And then she explains how she did, family outreach and visiting the student's home and things like that. And it was also to better connect with their students, for starters, and to better connect with the families. And this was something that I had to encounter in first and second grade, which I never really understood why my teacher would come to my to my house and try to talk to my parents about anything. I just thought, maybe there's something going on at school. But it turns out that it's actually a very good thing to do when you have minority students, and you have students and their families, having to deal with poverty and things like that. So that is the review for Chapter 12. And then we go on to review the article by Bartolome. And it is titled Creating an Equal Playing Field, Teachers as Advocates, Border Crossers, and Cultural Brokers, which I actually thought was a very good article. So Bartolome argues that teachers, this is the main thesis, that teachers need to gain political and ideological clarity to increase the changes of academic successes for their language minority students. And two, they should focus on having courage and hope. Courage to stand as advocates for their students, and hope that if we create this world with discrimination, that we are also able to free of it. And how she is presenting her thesis is in 3 sections. So she begins to explain the importance to recognize and better understand the ideological dimensions of teacher beliefs and the attitudes towards minority students. Understanding, 1. 2, she also discusses the results of an exploratory interview study on teacher ideology conducted at a high school in Southern California, which we'll talk about later. And then at the end, she starts concluding her thesis by discussing how teachers' beliefs and life experiences can inform teacher preparation efforts. So, how does she explain the importance to recognize and better understand teachers' beliefs and attitudes towards minority students? So in this section of the chapter, she explains the ideology of teachers using two types. She uses prospective teachers and pre-service teachers. Prospective teachers are they often come into the teaching education or teacher education programs, subscribing to deficit views of minority students and believing that the solution to their academic unachievement lies in assimilating them. And the pre-service teachers view the social hierarchy as fair because minority students are responsible for their advancements and their failures. This view results in two things, which are completely... Teachers play the blame game, where they blame the disadvantages of the minorities rather than blaming the white discrimination or an unfair system. Because I think we all understand, at this time and age, that we don't all get the exact same equal treatment. At least I hope we do. And for number two, teachers also oppose policies designed to increase minority opportunities. And with these two types of teachers, Bartolome explains that this attitude in teachers has been normalized and accepted. So discussing the results of an exploratory interview, the study on teacher ideology conducted at the Riverview High School in California, Southern California to be specific. So this study consisted of interviews with 4 educators who were chosen by their peers of their excellent work with Mexican, Latin, and language minority students. So we have, Mr. Tijerina, we have Miss Cortland, we have Mr. Broadbent, and then we have Dr. Peabody. We're going to call it Peabody. All right. And so they have these commonalities in their ideologies, which are interesting. They all questioned meritocratic explanations of the existing social order. And they all rejected the deficit views of Mexican Latino students, as well as romanticized views of the white middle class culture as superior. And they engaged in social or cultural border crossing experiences in which they either experience or witnessed something. And then they saw themselves as cultural brokers and as advocates of students. So how do these beliefs and life experiences inform teacher preparation efforts? So let's just try to put everything together now. So students should study ideology and be tasked with identifying both dominant and counter hegemonic ideologies so that they can assess their own ideologies in relations to others. It's fine. Looking for alternative explanations for this historical academic unachievement in minorities. So as your students, you should be able to ask them, why do you think that, it's very, unlikely that, minority, kids in families don't attend college? Why is it always the first generation? Why is it not the second generation? Do they lose, interest? Or is there a lack of resources, which is there more than likely is. Not only that, but this would also help teachers feel comfortable in taking on a position that counters dominant ideologies. There's plenty of students, more importantly, out there that believe that no, there's nothing wrong with the system. Everybody just gets the same treatment. We all go to the same school. We all attend these exact same classes, and we all have the same chance of, getting into college. And that's not necessarily the truth, unfortunately. So also the simulated border crossing experiences should be a part of a teacher preparation program, and they must be paired with the above analysis of ideologies. This would actually help the prospective teachers increase their political and ideological clarity. The prospective teacher should learn to question the status quo and the deromanticize middle class white culture. Although an dominant curriculum while avoiding an anti-white stance. You never want to be, pro something and then against, white people or, a specific race, because then you start getting, to be the bad teacher. You never want to take a stance against or for anything. You kind of just want to get the ideas rolling out of your students and say, why do you believe this? Or why do you think this? And then you have to, bring in both sides of the spectrum with a Hispanic student or, an African-American student explaining their circumstances and say, this is why I never got, what you got because of this. And the ideas start flowing, and you don't necessarily pin the students against each other, but you also, they start pointing out their views and their ideas, and you start realizing, what really is going on. As a teacher, it'll also help you as well. And then the teacher educator should address ways in which teachers act towards students as cultural brokers and mentors. And it's very important. I think we talked about this like last week or 2 weeks ago, maybe. I don't know. That it's important for teachers to be prepared to be a student's mentor. You spend, I don't know, maybe most of the day, you spend 8 hours of this child's day, 5 days a week out of the 7 days, and God knows how many months and how many days out of the year you spend with these kids. You have to realize, we all as teachers and going into the teaching field have to realize that these kids are spending a lot of time with us. They're gonna, look up to us. They're gonna see us as, the teacher knows more. They're going to, even if we don't know more than them, who knows? We may be just as, new and lost as, as they are, but they're gonna see that, and they're gonna want a mentor. They're gonna need a mentor in life. They're going to need someone who's going to guide them along the way, because chances are sometimes their parents don't guide them. No offense to the parents, but sometimes parents work, sometimes parents are free all day, but they work night shifts or something like that. We have to be prepared to be their mentors and cultural brokers as well. We have to be advocates for them. They're kids and they don't know how to express themselves. We have to be able to express, what they're thinking, what they're feeling out, and be, their advocate, their voice. Anyways, so that was the entire chapter 12 by Nieto, and the article that we discussed. And it basically kind of ties them all together, going into thinking you're going to conquer the world and with these kids, and then you come out and you realize that life is actually, being a teacher is a lot more difficult than you actually thought. And you're like, oh, this isn't what I thought it would be. I thought it would be rainbows and butterflies. But no, it doesn't turn out to be that way. And we all have to be prepared for the worst and for the best. We have to realize that we have kids, their education is in our hands, and we have to teach them as much as possible in order for them to go on to the next grade or go on in life and have them ready for everything. So that's all I have.